we started something at GW called the Black Students Union. It's now called the Black People's Union. But during the course of that, I wasn't the president of that, but I became the chairman of a Black Cultural Weekend that we did under the banner of the Black Students Union. And in the course of putting on that weekend, it was really my first real foray into the city, deep into the city. And I got to know a lot of people, and we brought lots of people to campus, and we also brought a lot of kids to campus. And I was talking to someone I had met during that weekend, Mike Malone, who was a graduate student at the time at Georgetown, working on his master's in French. And we were standing around talking, and I said, you know, I've seen so many talented kids in DC since I've been working on this, and it's terrible that they don't have anywhere to go, and their talent's so raw and unpolished. And he said, why don't you start a school? I actually wrote a 3-page proposal shortly thereafter, which is kind of, the thought is kind of laughable now. And I took it to Lloyd Elliott, who was then the president of GW, and whom I had come to know quite well, because he kept strong relationships with a few of us, wanting to assure that we didn't burn his campus down or something. And, you know, and I said, President Elliott, I've got this great idea. Would you be willing to give us space and give us money and et cetera? And he agreed that I could do it. And that summer, and I raised money. I raised quite a bit of money for my age, having no idea what I was doing. And by the end of the summer, we had 90 students, and it was called Workshops for Careers in the Arts. Then I started realizing I'm raising over $1 million a year now. This is not going to continue to happen. And so I started lobbying the school system to give us a building and to designate us as a public school. And in 1974, we opened as the Duke Ellington School of the Arts at our present location at 3500 R Street. And we took over what had been a DC public school.
Sometimes you find perfect pairings. And Peggy was that, she was the machinery, she was a mechanism for the vision. Mike was the artistic visionary. You know, he knew what he wanted, he knew what he could pull out of people, and he knew what it would take to make students better artists. And Peggy believed in his vision and followed that, and she made it possible with her connects and her aggressiveness to make that school happen. She was really the oil to his engine. They were passionate about what they wanted to do, they were committed, and they were activists to make it happen.
Peggy was the, I'll say she was the political powerhouse, and Mike Malone was the insightful craftsperson. You know, he knew about production, he knew all of that. She knew it too, but he was more intimately involved with that kind of thing and what professionals need to know. I'm not even going to say students. He understood what the professional attitude had to be. And so his thing was choosing people who could give that attitude to those kids. And we're talking about people like Percy Martin, Michael Platt, Martha Jackson Jarvis, Winnie Owens, Ed Love, Bill Harris. And then you have people who were from that first wave of what it meant to be a real artist, like Lillian Burwell. You had these people having an opportunity to go beyond whatever the DCPS curriculum was in terms of what students are supposed to get from art, that art was just as important as English.
Ellington has been that mission of Peggy Cafritz and Mike Malone of young folks who otherwise would not have an opportunity to excel in the arts. Its whole concept, this whole mission was about bringing the arts and understanding the wealth of talent that was here in the city. And everybody didn't have access.
When the art school opened up, we were like, oh, let's audition for the art school, And my twin sister wanted to be a dancer at the time, and I wanted to be a dancer too. And she was like, no, you go do your thing, go do theater. So I auditioned for the theater department, my younger sister and I. So my twin was in dance, and my younger sister and I were in the theater department. Glenda Dickerson, who was the head of the theater department at that time. It was so exciting because what Glenda gave us was our very own Black selves. She instilled in us pride in who we are and what we offer. And she often would call upon the ancestors, to inspire and protect us. And so it was a real education. And I say that my education was revolutionary because Glenda was not having it with white theater traditions. And she introduced us to nonlinear forms, ritualistic forms of theater, um, devised theater. There was something called the Living Library where we would perform poetry by Langston Hughes, et cetera, all the great poets. And so it was different for me to be exposed to such revolutionary ideas.
I think a common thread was we were all treated a little differently at our other schools because we either looked different or we were doing something different. But bottom line is that we all shared this love of art or music or dance or theater. And I think that was the commonality amongst us, that even though someone was in theater or dance, I was in visual arts, we could still understand what was going on and we could accept what was going on and respect what they were doing, even though I couldn't dance or that kind of thing. Jarvis Grant, he made you really dig deep into the photograph. Oh, this doesn't look too good, you need to do better. And you're like, really? And he's still like that. But he made me really appreciate the medium. And in fact, we had two photography teachers, Margaret Paris Stevenson, as well as Mr. Grant, Jarvis Grant. And he really made, to this day, I attribute some of the things that I appreciate about photography or understand about photography because of him, and also because of Margaret Stevenson. But Jarvis made sure that if you didn't do it right the first time, he wanted you to get it right. And we may not have liked that back then, or we would kind of say, oh, I don't understand why, I've worked on this so hard. But he knew what he wanted us to see. And to this day, I still think about that.
That was amazing, to instill that into these kids who are now, I see some of them now, and they're 60 years old and stuff, and they're doing their art and stuff like that. It was like, you planted a seed that they knew definitely they're going to art school and they're going to do this and they're going to do that. They saw themselves as artists in the future.
The time was right. The time was right. There were kids who were super, super, super dedicated and wanted the arts. They were hungry. So that was another piece that made it really, really flourish. And being able to take kids out of Southeast, where most of the talent happened to be, taking them from there to that kind of environment in Georgetown, life-changing, absolutely life-changing.
This blending of scholar and artist coming together in my experience at the school sort of followed me throughout the rest of my life. Later when I became a playwright, then suddenly all the writing and research that goes into writing plays sort of came together with the artistic act of writing. And so it sort of really laid the foundation for what would become my artistic journey throughout my life.
I was in the museum studies department, and I learned everything I know about critical thinking in that department. I learned about what it meant to be a young artist, what it meant to be a young African American artist, and the importance of using our voices to inspire change for the better in our society. And that's something that I carry with me today, as well as a lot of Duke Ellington alumni that I speak with, work with on a daily basis.
I tell students now, you'll thank me later. You may not understand why you have to have this or why I'm giving you this now, but eventually you have that aha moment where you're like, wow, this is why he was on me. This is why Percy Martin was on me about being able to composition and color and all the things that go along with basic two-dimensional design. The same thing with Bill Harris, being in his class and being frustrated, but he knew why you were frustrated. And he was trying to get through to you, just like Lillian Burwell or Jarvis Grant. You didn't understand until actually you were in your senior year and you left. And then as a professional, you totally respect the fact that they were on you like that. I don't think of Ellington as a job. I think of it as something I need to do to pass it forward, and because I do it every day or often, and it's a challenge to put it into an assignment form, but to be able to see students take work and say, we got this, and they hang it, they do everything that's involved with putting an exhibition together, makes me proud that I can see them do this, and that there are still students that want to do this. And when they go off to their internships or they say, I want to apply to the same school you went to, and then they get accepted, make a phone call and say, look, I got a student that's on their way up. It's full circle. It's full circle for me. And to think that 50 years later, 49 years later, because I'm in that second class, that this school is still living up to Mike Malone and Peggy Cooper's dream.